Shocker. Imagine my surprise. Just imagine my surprise when Uncle Casey found out that the WNBA is struggling to maintain their ratings without Caitlin Clark. To make matters worse, and this is something I have definitely noticed in the last 3 or 4 weeks, especially since the All-Star game.
The WNBA just ran headfirst into a harsh truth, and it's written loud and clear. No Caitlin Clark, no momentum. TV ratings are falling off a cliff, faster than a late-game collapse under a Stephanie White-coached squad. One groin injury, and suddenly the league's historic growth storyline feels more like an empty slogan. The real question is simple. Can this league afford to go even a few weeks without its biggest attraction? Be honest. Are fans really showing up for the other stars when Clark isn't on the floor?
And that problem is Caitlin Clark not playing in WNBA games. Now, what all does this affect? The ratings are plummeting. Guys, there's ratings for a couple of these games that are eye-poppingly bad. We're talking about down in unrivaled territory.
Here's the reality the league didn't want to admit. There was only one guaranteed formula for massive TV numbers this season. Caitlin Clark versus Angel Reese. That matchup was the engine driving everything. Indiana Fever against the Chicago Sky. No think tanks, no marketing masterminds required. Just put two of the most recognizable names in women's basketball on the same court, 5 times in one season, and let the hype do the rest.
To maintain interest. Now, in fairness to the dump, the ratings I'm about to share with you guys, they're not bad. Matter of fact, some of them are actually good, at least when compared to what this dump used to draw, which was nothing. But the reason I think the WNBA is in trouble has less to do with these ratings and more to do with what I think is coming.
But when a league fails to protect its stars, this is what happens. They disappear. Caitlin Clark has now missed over a month with a groin injury, the type of soft tissue issue that demands real recovery time, not grit and tape. Reese has also been sidelined for more than a week. That meant this past Saturday's so-called marquee matchup featured neither of its headline players. The result? Brutal. The lowest ratings these teams have posted since Clark entered the league. Not just below average, rock bottom. Worse than last year. Completely forgettable. And the numbers make it undeniable. Their first meeting this season was massive. 2.7 million average viewers on ABC, peaking at 3.1 million, up 115% from last year's ABC average. That game had everything. Foul controversy, a Clark triple-double, Chicago getting blown out, even the infamous investigation. All of it started there. For the second meeting still delivered, though the slide had begun. Primetime on CBS at 8 p.m., pulling 1.92 million viewers, still one of the most watched regular season WNBA games since 2001, ranking 8th over a 20-plus year span at the time. That's what happens when both stars are expected to play, or at least when fans believe they might. Then came the third game on ABC, and the drop became impossible to ignore. From 2.7 million down to 1.9, then falling again to 1.5 million. That's over 1.2 million viewers deciding they were done. I said it then, 1.5 million made it the lowest viewed Fever Sky matchup since last year's 1.53 million, and Clark was still active. Fast forward to last Saturday. Same network, same primetime slot, same matchup, and they couldn't even reach 1.4 million. Try 1.3 million. More than 500,000 viewers checked out the moment Clark wasn't involved. From May 22nd to August 10th, this must-see rivalry lost 1.4 million viewers. That's not a minor dip. It's a disaster by TV standards. Networks hate it. Advertisers hate it. And I guarantee Kathy Engelbert hates it most. Because without Clark, national interest in the Fever evaporates. Fans aren't tuning in for Kelsey Mitchell isolation plays. They're not planning weekends around Lexi Hull. And they definitely aren't watching for the nightly officiating circus. What makes it worse is how this groin injury has been handled publicly. One day after it happened, Clark was labeled day-to-day. Weeks later, she was suddenly out indefinitely. ESPN even circled August 12th as a potential return date. Then just yesterday, she was listed as a game
regular season. And the craziest thing about this last groin injury with Caitlin Clark is how it's been covered. The day after she had the groin injury, she was listed as day-to-day. And then a couple weeks after that, then she was listed to being out indefinitely. Now, ESPN had August 12th as the circled return date for Caitlin Clark to get back onto the court. And just yesterday, she was listed as a game time decision for today's game against the Dallas Wings. And then after practice yesterday, Coach Stephanie White basically came out and said, like, no, Caitlin Clark hasn't even been practicing. So they changed it from a game time decision to her being out.
What happens
So
next?
what happens?
The WNBA starts
gets
to panic. Suddenly, the quiet chatter begins. Hey, Fever,
Can you tease a Caitlin
can you
Clark
hint
return?
at a Caitlin
Just
Clark
dangle
return?
it back up?
Just tease it a little.
It's a play straight
Float
out of
the idea. Give fans hope so the ratings don't completely collapse. It's straight from the PR desperation playbook. Keep the audience
PR
interested
desperation
without
handbook.
actually putting
String
anything
the
real
audience
on the
along
court.
without actual.
And I get it to a certain extent. The fans, the media does not need to know every little thing that's going on with Caitlin Clark's injuries, especially a star player like that. We will never know all the information, nor should we know all the information, and that's actually good for Caitlin. It protects her for when she does come back on the court. She can't be targeted. Teams can't use a certain injury or ailment against her if people don't really know what is going on. But the reporting of her timeline in general, there has been no rhyme or reason to what has been shared about it. To put her as a game time decision for today's game, and then Coach Stephanie White basically coming out and saying she has done no practicing with the team, that's crazy. And I brought it up in my video.
But here's the problem no one wants to say out loud. Clark's injury isn't something you rush unless you're willing to risk turning it into a long-term, recurring issue. Groin injuries don't care about TV contracts or primetime slots. Push it too fast and you're not talking weeks anymore, you're talking chronic damage.
Back in the mix when all of these teams are at peak condition, and we already know what happens when Caitlin Clark gets back out on the court. Teams play defense on her differently. They play extra physical with her. There's all of these different factors that come into play. That's why I'm sort of leaning to the point of maybe Caitlin should be out for the rest of the season. Maybe this season is just done for her. Maybe it doesn't make sense for her to come back into the mix if the Fever aren't contenders. Are the Fever contenders at this point? I'm just not so sure. Do you risk another injury that can again compound and turn into something else down the line?
And you'd think a league that relies this heavily on one player for national relevance would have protected her from the start. Instead, we got nonstop targeting, inconsistent whistles, and officiating that treated the league's biggest draw like a nobody-running pickup at a local gym. And don't pretend this only hurts Fever games. Look at the rest of the schedule without Clark. Sun versus Liberty, around 180,000 viewers. Dream versus Mercury, roughly 160,000. If the growth narrative were as real as the League and Players Association claim, NBA TV games would be clearing at least 250,000 to 300,000 viewers. They're not even touching 200K without the Caitlin Clark effect. That's what she really is, a league-wide stimulus package. When Clark plays, ratings jump. When she sits, numbers fall off a cliff. The WNBA has leaned on her so hard that without her, the cracks are obvious. And this didn't come out of nowhere. The warning signs were there from day one. Your most valuable player, by ratings and marketability, was absorbing more contact than most NFL receivers and getting fewer calls than a spam number. Landing space violations ignored. Arm grabs on drives ignored. Clear hacks at the rim waved off. Play on. Ask yourself this. If Clark got the same whistle Paige Buchers gets, would she still be sidelined right now? Probably not. The Fever might be a top 3 seed, and this August ratings freefall wouldn't even exist. But instead, here we are. The bubble looks shaky. Owners see the graphs. You don't need an MBA to understand it. From 3.1 million peak audiences to barely 1.3 million, and NBA TV games struggling to cross 200K, the trend is unmistakable. Straight down whenever the one player the league should protect isn't playing. And here's the real danger. This isn't just about today. Every week Clark is out, casual fans move on. They find something else to watch. The habit breaks. And once that habit is gone, getting it back is brutal, especially when the alternative is teams full of stars casual viewers can't name even if you give them hints. Let's be real. The league's marketing boils down to Caitlin Clark and everyone else. And that second part isn't carrying its weight. Networks don't wait patiently for stars to heal. ESPN, CBS, ABC, they pay for consistency, not spikes that disappear the moment one player is unavailable. When executives see over 1 million viewers vanish as soon as Clark is out, they start questioning future commitments. No network wants to invest in a product that collapses every time one athlete misses games. That's not leverage, it's weakness going into the next TV deal. The owners know it. The league knows it. And instead of fixing the core issue, protecting the star holding everything together, they're teasing game-time decisions to squeeze out short-term bumps. We've all seen this trick. Game-time decision usually means the answer is no, but maybe you'll tune in just in case. It might work once or twice. After that, fans catch on. Trust disappears. And nothing kills ratings faster than an audience that feels played.
Not be thrown back into any mix if she doesn't have significant practices under her belt before she goes into game speed. You can try to simulate game speed as much as you want in practice. You will never be able to. Game speed is game speed. There's also a lot more adrenaline, all of these different things pumping when you're playing in front of a sold out crowd that the Indiana Fever do every single night. If I'm their coach, she needs to practice for at minimum a week. At the minimum, she needs to be doing everything in practice for at least a week before you throw her back in the mix. Now you're going to throw her back in the mix when all of these teams are at peak condition.
The real issue for the WNBA is that Caitlin Clark has been turned into the centerpiece for almost everything this season. Highlights revolve around her. Promotions feature her face. Primetime slots are built for her games. Merchandise pushes lean heavily on her name. And once that centerpiece is removed, what's left? A slate of teams pulling viewership numbers that struggle to compete with some high school boys' state championship games. That's not exaggeration. Some of those matchups barely crack 250K on local streams. Then comes the league's favorite buzzword, growth. We've heard it nonstop. Biggest season ever. Historic ratings. Merchandise selling out. But strip Clark out of the equation, and that so-called growth deflates instantly, like a balloon left in the heat. You can't call it league-wide growth when it's clearly driven by one player. That's like claiming basketball exploded in the 90s because of the Bulls, when everyone knows it was Michael Jordan. One player changing the game, not the entire league. Now here's the conversation the WNBA avoids. Long-term damage. If Clark misses another couple of weeks, that's more primetime games underperforming. That's more casual fans finding other sports, other shows, other habits. And no, they don't all magically come back the second she's cleared to play. Some return, sure, but a meaningful chunk is gone for good. And then there are the playoffs. That's where things get uncomfortable. If Clark returns and the ratings don't immediately jump back to May levels, what's the explanation? You can't blame timing anymore. When an entire season is marketed around one player, her comeback is supposed to be the jackpot. If it's not, that exposes something ugly about the league's supposed momentum. We also can't ignore the elephant in the room. The physical targeting, the inconsistent officiating, the rough her up because nothing will be called style of defense. This groin injury didn't appear out of nowhere. You don't miss weeks from a harmless collision. You get there from nonstop contact and a lack of whistles that protect you from cumulative damage. If Clark had been officiated like a true star from day one, there's a good chance we wouldn't even be discussing missed games right now. She'd be gearing up for another Fever Sky showdown. Ratings would be back above 2 million, and Kathy Engelbert would be smiling in front of every camera in sight. Instead, the league is watching viewership leak away while media voices openly question the historic growth narrative. Angel Reese being sidelined only makes things worse. The league struck gold with the Clark versus Reese rivalry, but neither player was protected from the physical toll. Now both are out, and the marquee matchup has turned into two middle-of-the-pack teams without their stars, pulling numbers so low that network executives are probably checking their phones instead of watching the second half. And there's another layer to this. The Fever without Clark aren't just harder to sell. They're less competitive. The offense stagnates, spacing collapses, and defenses can load up without worrying about a logo range pull-up. That brand of basketball doesn't hook casual viewers. They're not tuning in to watch broken half-court sets or fourth-quarter turnover parades. So what's the solution? In the short term, you stretch the possible return angle as long as you can without burning fan trust. Hint that she's close. Show her courtside, smiling, signing autographs. Release just enough footage of light workouts to make people think, maybe next game. That might give you a temporary boost. But long-term, there are only two options. Fix the officiating and actually protect your stars, or admit that this league lives and dies based on one player's availability. Because let's be honest, the growth everyone keeps celebrating is built on a fragile foundation. The moment Clark isn't on the floor, ratings fall off a cliff. That's not growth, that's dependency. And any business dependent on a single asset is always one bad month away from panic. The owners see the data. The networks see it. Advertisers see it too. You don't need to be a basketball expert to understand that if one player's absence wipes out over 1 million viewers from your biggest matchup, the problem is bigger than an injury. It means the product can't stand on its own. The irony is the WNBA actually has talented, marketable players who could draw attention, if the league bothered to promote them consistently. But they don't. There's no secondary push, no backup plan. When Clark is out, there's no next star ready to carry casual interest. It's Caitlin Clark or nothing. And right now, without her, it's nothing. One injury has exposed the league's entire business model, and the numbers don't lie. If this dependency isn't fixed, fans and networks will move on fast, long before the league finishes talking about growth. So what do you think? Can the WNBA survive without Clark? Or is this the beginning of a serious collapse?